This duel's as good as finished, Elestrals Yugi. My board is unbreakable. My Unk is unthinkable. There's nothing you can do. You're wrong, Elestrals Kaiba. As long as I have faith in my friends and the wind, I can't possibly lose. I draw. Fool, I have assembled all 5 special Elestrals cards. With these, my victory is assured. No, it can't be. Not Elestrals Exodia. Island of Aeolia. Aeolus. Wind. Flammamoth. And a guy. Go, my powerful creature! Oh, it's just Flammamoth? Earthquake, Laurels, GG. Damn, alright, you got me. Game 2?
Good afternoon, my Cracker Tugas. I'm MBT, and this is 20 Spirit Testing. Okay, give me a break with this. I know I'm late, but I was sick last week. However, I was happy to learn there's another individual even more sick in the head than I am, and today we'll be playing his deck. Presenting Flammamoth.
Flame on, flame on.
So here's the list, straight from Daimax's video. As always, I'll give you a background about the archetype, a little bit of a discussion about what I hope the deck can do, and of course, the card by card. But first, if you've been compelled to casting by my videos, I have great news for me! I've got an affiliate code for the Elestrals shop, so if you intend to pick up cardboard or plushies, please use that code and get me some cash. With that, let's fuck around with Flammamoth. Flammamoth's got 2 things going for it. Firstly, it's one of the only Elestrals cards with the word negate attached to it, and secondly, it's got a beautiful alternate art. Unfortunately, that's basically everything it's got going for it. This was enough for Daimax to try his damnedest to make it work in the video linked below, but while that video shares a list and theory, you'll notice it doesn't include any games. There's a reason for that. The short of it is the only reasonable way to make Flammamoth is a 4-card combo. A Wind Elestral, a Nexus Bank, Tower, and, well, Flammamoth. Most of these pieces are searchable, but developing them takes time, which usually means you go low enough that the Flammamoth's only going to get 1 or 2 activations, which usually means you lose, which usually means you throw the deck in the garbage. But I think it's probably worth coping, if only to artificially increase the price of my own full arts. With that, let's get into the card by card. We're playing Lavalith because we're in fire, and 3 copies of Vast Rabbit because we do need to assemble pieces of a combo. We're on 3 Fin Dust, which can disenchant a wind in order to search for a rune that costs at least wind. That includes both Aeolus, which we are playing 3 of, and 3 copies of Towers of the Winds, which can nexus a wind to a wind-enchanted Elestral, and if you do, can special ascend it into an Elestral from your hand. The one you'll be special ascending into is Flammamoth, which gets +1 for each enchanting wind on the field, and when a player activates a rune effect, you can expend Fire to negate the effect and destroy that rune once per turn. Because we're on Aeolus, we're also on a smattering of cards that feature in Wind Nexus. We've got Galaxair, Sorlet, Nemesail, P-Gust, and 2 copies of Atoxisworm. We're playing 3 copies of Island of Aeolia. It does a really good job of beefing up the defensive stat of Flammamoth, which is really low, but also it does a good job of being a thing you can Nexus to and from with Tower. Finally, we're playing 3 copies of Aeromare for similar reasons. If you ascend over this Aeromare, it can become an artifact rune that empowers the Ascension that prevents it from being destroyed or targeted by opponents' Elestral effects. If you don't do this, it's actually really easy to kill with something like a Boombat. However, the number 1 thing you would expect that this protects you from is, like, Eddy. But it turns out neither Eddy nor Mudlet actually target, so, you know. After that, we've got the runes. We've got 3 Ambrosia, 2 Drops of Leaf, 2 Poison-Tipped Arrow, 2 Gorgon's Gaze, and 3 Shield. The boy math here is pretty set in stone, but it's not beautiful. We've got enough Pyro to cast Flammamoth and then activate it twice, 3 Zaptor, and then Wind up to 12, but you are going to have to be really, really careful about your numbers. You want to expend these Zaptors almost immediately. So with that, let's hop into a game. Our match is up against Earth Nexus, and you can see we've opened okay. We're going to keep this hand. It's got an Astrabbit, a Flammamoth, and a Gorgon's Gaze. Thankfully, we have found that Fin Dust. Now, the Fin Dust does get us to full combo. We can use the Fin Dust to find an Aeolus. Then next turn, we can use an Aeolus to find a Fin Dust to find a Tower. Then all we're missing is a Nexus Bank, but we could over-enchant the Aeolus to potentially give it to us if we don't find one before then. The problem is I have described a combo that will take like 4 turns to get there. I'm going to negate the effect of this Elechick. I really just don't like Elechick resolving. And ooh, another Aeromare, exactly what we wanted here. So I'm thinking pretty long and hard about what I want to do here. Like, theoretically, we could get on the aggressive, use something like a Galaxair in order to beat down the Elechick, but I think that's a really bad idea. It's not like we're ever going to ever be able to contest the board in any sort of meaningful way, so we might as well develop the Findust here and just pray for no Gorgon's Gaze. Thankfully, there is not one. We'll use the effect of the Findust to send itself to the graveyard for an Aeolus, and then we're just going to chill. We're going to say, out my Astrabbit or else. Our opponent's going to draw, and unfortunately for us, this deck is just chock full of ways to out an Astrabbit. Case in point, here's a Jolton. Jolton here is going to go ahead and grab a Feloy Forest, and I'm like, oh, okay, I know what's going on here now. Despite the fact that we Gorgon's Gazed the Elechick, it appears they drew the Demeter for turn, so sometimes you're just nice with it. They're going to go Demeter in order to pump their Elechick, get over the Astrabbit, and then in for one. We have to start using these Lycorises pretty aggressively here, and, you know, in fact, I decide even that it's not worth losing a potential Wind Elestral when I could just send a Zaptor to the graveyard, because it's unlikely we're going to get another Rabbit going anyway. We're going to go Aeolus just for 2 here. Would go for 1 more, but you see we drew the Island of Aeolia off the top of the deck, which is a better Nexus target. We're going to go for a Findust, immediately cast it, send it to the grave, grab ourselves a tower, and we're going to say, go, do as much as you can. Next turn, it is Flammamoth time. Our opponent's going to cast their copy of Feloy Forest and a Viscerus. This telegraphs that, like, there's an Altar or maybe a Bloom set, which is great news for us because that doesn't really contest coming down on the Flammamoth. They're going to get in for 3 here, which is disastrous, but they were talking about in chat that they were considering just going for 5, just like putting us at 7 and being like, it's going to cost you so much to get to Flammamoth that maybe it's just worth to sink in what we can. They go for 3, and unfortunately we have to expend, like, all the Lycorises because, you know, we have no other way to do it. So we're going to go Aramare here, and then afterwards we are going to go for the Island of Aeolia. We're going to go for the Tower of the Winds. So it's really frustrating how this works out. The Aramare could theoretically be attached to the Flammamoth, but I'm not super concerned about, like, Elestral targeting in this matchup. I'm even considering going for the Galaxair here, but instead I'm just like, no, we'll Island of Aeolia. We're going to fire this Tower of the Winds. We are down to, I believe, 1 singular Lycoris, because unfortunately you can't do it this way. You have to cast from your Spirit deck here, because you need to have the right number of Enchanting Spirits under the Aramare in order to perform the special enchant, because the special Ascension only enables you to enchant 1 additional spirit on it, and we don't want that going to the graveyard because of state-based actions. So down comes the Flammamoth. We now have the negate online, but also all of our eggs are kind of in this basket. We're going to get attacking. We get to bring our opponent down to a respectable position, and I'm feeling pretty good from here. The thing that could screw us up is we are going to have to use this Flammamoth activation on the Demeter. So if our opponent has any other removal, something like an Earthquake or a Laurels, I think they are still pretty clearly under. But something similar would really screw us up. They're thinking here, this is kind of a hard turn for them. They can just wait on it, like switch everything to defense position and put up blockers while they attempt to draw 2 Invoke Runes to out this card. Not a terrible plan. Here they are going to go for, in defense position, a copy of Equilinx, which at minimum also prevents us from developing any back row, because we expect the set card is something like a Bloom or an Altar. We will just go ahead and draw for turn. We find an Ambrosia. Now, I make a really critical misplay here. We probably should just fire the Ambrosia. But I'm thinking to myself, I haven't yet triggered the effect of the Flammamoth. So if I Ambrosia after the first activation of Flammamoth, I can put Fire Spirits back, which I can then use to, like, Flammamoth again afterwards, right? Unfortunately, it doesn't really go our way for a reason you're about to see. Our opponent's going to go for a Mudlet here. Now, Mudlet, unfortunately for us, does not target. It just changes the position. So we now have a 4 defense Flammamoth into a board that includes a Demeter, but our opponent doesn't have a really good way to get over it. They're going to go for an Ambro, just, I guess, baiting the Flammamoth, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to fall for that. We have to contest the Demeter. So they're going to put 3 cards back, and then afterwards they're going to try and fire the Demeter to contest the Flammamoth. We will use the Flammamoth negate to stop the Demeter and destroy it, and then they will be hopefully up the creek without a paddle. We can Ambro on our next turn, retain another negate. We'll even be up in terms of spirit count. But unfortunately, the thing that comes back to bite me in the ass here is developing the Galaxair, because what's going to happen is our opponent's going to sit on it for a sec. This is a long turn from them, but it makes sense once you see the play. It's not super intuitive. What they end up doing is, eventually, after all is said and done, they do activate the effect of the Demeter in order to pump, I believe, the Elechick, like it matters. Pumping that Elestral does count as activating the effect of Demeter for the effect of Flammamoth, which enables you to negate and destroy a rune whose effect is activating. It doesn't just stop activations, it stops the activation of effects as well. Something good to get out in front of in terms of like, Yu-Gi-Oh! Versus Elestral's terminology that could conceivably cause a headache in the future. They're really in the tank on this, and, you know, the good news is the game is fast enough that it doesn't matter. They are going to go for it, and then upon going for it, they're going to chain to the activation of the Flammamoth counter rune, Bloom. So Bloom is going to enable them by paying from their spirit deck to nexus the remaining spirit on Demeter, or the spirit from Mudlet onto the Elechick. And then because the Elechick is now Earth Enchanted, it can get an additional Earth Spirit from Bloom. So everything on their graveyard, or on their field, goes to the graveyard because of state-based, and then they hit over the Galaxair for 2. This puts us in a position where we have nothing in the Spirit deck, and we are all in on the Flammamoth. The Flammamoth also does not have a negate anymore, which is horrifying. Means that any individual rune that contests it is going to win the game, and anything our opponent draws is either going to be a rune that wins the game, or it's going to be an Elestral they can just cast in defense position. Just a horrifying position that we never want to be in. I can't imagine a scenario in which we win this game, but we're going to play it out. We're going to go in with our Flammamoth Blast! And then afterwards, our opponent's going to draw. They're going to think about it for a second. It just behooves them to sit in defense position rather than expend a draw because they don't want to take 4. Flammamoth Blast! And then they'll draw again. Trying to find an out to this card. Down comes another Spirit, and we're just casting Elechick. Okay, Demeter is horrifying, but they also need an Elestral that switches the Flammamoth to defense position in order to actually do something with it. Which means that it's kind of Mudlet or bust at this point, or any invoke or any counter. We'll go Flammamoth Blast and eat the Elechick. At this point, my opponent goes, "Oh, I'm so nice with it," and goes for an Astro Rabbit. And I'm like, "Oh God, okay, this is very over." They're gonna foretell or look at the top 3 cards of their deck, rather grab one in hand and then put the other 2 back, shuffle it up. I'm just assuming that I'm dead at this point. They are going to cast an Ambrosia. Obviously, nothing I can do about that. I don't have the negate up anymore. They'll go all the way back to 9. This is not looking particularly good from our position, but maybe a couple more Flammamoth Blasts will do it. Let's go for one here. Blast them! Yeah, that's what I like to see, baby. Okay, finally, I think they are going to just cast a Resting on Your Laurels, and we lose. We just lose immediately. There's nothing more we could do. So we're back with the deck, and it's bad. It's terrible. Let's do the pros and cons. First, the pros. 1. Flammamoth does put them on Gotta Have It. It's almost invincible in terms of removal, and with fewer EQs and Laurels around, it's pretty unlikely your opponent will have both. 2. Being live on both turns rocks. On your turn, it contests a back row, making it a great attacker, and on your opponent's, you can erase an EQ or a Demeter activation. And 3. It's pretty. And the cons. 1. The deck is bricky as all hell. Through the use of movie magic. You only saw one game here today, but even that game required like 4 mulligans we took for free. This deck produces unplayable more than it produces a hand that does anything. 2. It's slow as hell. Often you get so low so quick that even after establishing the boy, the margins are just so terrible as to what you can actually accomplish that it's not worth. And 3, there's a bunch of cards that automatically win the game. Boombat, an Elestral, and an Eddy. It's easy to get cooked. All in all, you know, I appreciate Daimax's ability to look at some sort of large bird and profess that it is the best thing you can be doing in any given format in any given game, but I'm not buying it for this card.